Now, one thing we'd like to support is a stream of quotes. So let's go ahead and implement that in this video. So I'm going to come in here, add a new method. And again, this is going to return back a server response. This time we'll say stream quotes. This is going to take in a server request. And this time we're going to set the content type to application stream JSON. And we'll make it 200, just to be a little different on this one. So that sets up our handler function for this. Again, this is going to be the Spring Managed component for us. And all this is going to do is handle the request. And now we also have to change our quote router as well. And in this case, we have this, and we can say and route. And again, we can say quotes here. And accept the media type of application JSON, but this time we want to say stream JSON. And this time we'll say stream quotes. So you can see how this functional composition is working for us. Might be a little bit easier if you reformat to so. So a couple different ways to set this up. It depends on your personal taste. But you can see how we're using functional composition here in setting up the router function. So this is a bean that's being configured through functional composition. And what we've done is we've set up two routes, and make sure this is correct here. So we have application JSON for one, and then application stream JSON. So on the first one, it's just going to invoke this fetch quotes, and then the second one, where we're specifying the stream, it's going to invoke the stream of quotes. Okay, if you've been taking my courses for a while, you know that I use branches in GitHub. And effectively what I'll do is I'll create a couple branches. And what you can do is check out these different branches, and you can see exactly what has changed in the branches. You can do compares. So you can compare this against master, compare it to different branch, so you can see the exact code that has been added. Now, typically I will start off on master and add to it, but this time I did a little bit something different. So I did a master, and I did the initial project, so that was the first one in. And then these are the different lessons that we had in this section of the course. Now, I am going to do something unique to this course because I want to use this service. I'm going to merge back this last one into master, and probably evolve master as I need to for the course, because what I'm going to be doing with this WebFlux stock quote service, we're going to be using that in upcoming modules in the course. I think the next thing I'm going to do is a MongoDB. So we'll use this as a feeder. So we'll set up a web client that'll go out here and get our stocks, and then we'll persist those to a Mongo database. So that this just be an example for us to work with streaming. And then later on, I might want to use this to send off messages to RabbitMQ. So this will be like the provider for that. So a couple different scenarios that we can use here as far as using this as a cornerstone for passing messages around. But I did want to point out that I am going to be updating master quite a bit. If I need to make changes to it, I'll probably do it in master. But for this section of the course, I will maintain the what is it? We got about a half dozen branches here, so that we'll be utilizing now. I did start this off. You can see that I am on Spring Boot M5. And that's the most recent release of Spring Boot. And as those come out, I will definitely be updating all branches with that. You can also see that I am running Circle CI on this, so we are doing a CI build. And maybe I'll do something fun in the future, like add this into Docker so we can run this little service in a Docker container. So that could be handy for other things. But just want to let you know about that little change. Many of you have probably taken my courses know that I do this with the branches, but usually master is just a shell. But in this case, master will be an active branch, and we'll be using this WebFlux stock quote service as a cornerstone for future modules in this course. All right, in this part of the course, we are going to have some fun. What we want to do is create a service that is going to give us a stream of stock quotes. So we're going to use the Spring Framework 5 WebFlux for this, and we're going to be using that framework. So this is going to be all reactive top to bottom, and we're going to create a class that's going to create stock quotes for us. So we're going to set up, I think, 10 stock quotes, and we'll have prices on them, and then we'll use random just to randomly update the prices on the quotes, and then a now function to give those quotes a timestamp. And all the service is going to do is sit there and create a stream of quotes. So we'll have stock quotes coming out of it, and we'll be able to consume this with other stuff coming up in the course. But in this part of the course, what we're going to be doing is we'll develop that, we'll create that service that will emit stock quotes, and then we're going to use Spring WebFlux to expose that as a web front end. So we'll have a RESTful style API for this. We'll have 2 endpoints here. One endpoint will be able to say, hey, just give me 10 stock quotes, and we'll get 10 stock quotes back from it. The other one will actually use streams. We'll say, hey, give me a stream of stock quotes. And when this is running, it's going to give us stock quotes forever until we say stop. So it's just going to sit there and run and run and run and run and create stock quotes forever. So fun little service here we're going to get our hands on with some functional programming. We'll set this all up using router functions, so some of the fun stuff that I don't think I've shown you yet. But it's all brand new stuff inside of Spring Framework 5, so it's going to be a fun little project. And this project here is going to be a cornerstone for future stuff coming up in the course. So we'll use this as a producer of messages and stock quotes that we can consume with other stuff, and we'll have fun exploring how we can consume this too. But here in this part of the course, we're just going to create the service that's going to emit stock quotes. So it'll be a fun little project for us to work on. All right, in this video, we are going to create a new project. So I'm going to come over here to IntelliJ, and you can do the exact same thing by going to start.spring.io, but I'm going to do this right from inside of IntelliJ. And let's see here, we'll come in and do a new project. And we're going to use the Spring Initializer, and I am a little bit older Java JDK. I need to get that updated. Just going by the 1.8 and 121, that's been out for a little bit, so that is my bad. I need to get that JDK updated. And I'm going to say guru. So we're going to be building a stock quote service using WebFlux. And this is setting up everything. The Java 1.9 support inside of Spring Spring Boot is not quite there yet. They're still working out some bugs, so I'm excited to get over to Java 1.9, but we're not quite there yet. I'm going to leave this as a Maven project. I've been doing a lot of Gradle lately. I go back and forth, so let's do that. Okay, that's all good. And we are going to switch over to Spring Boot M5. So we're on a milestone release of Spring Boot. And for this, we want the reactive web. And I am a Project Lombok fan. I'm going to bring in Lombok as well. And that, I think, is everything that we need. I'm just double checking things. No, that's not all we're going to need for this project. Is just the reactive web. We're going to build a completely reactive backend. We're not going to hook it up to any type of data store. We're just going to do things programmatically and generate random stock quotes. So for this project, we're going to be more focused on using the reactive types and not going to worry too much about a persistence layer at this point in time. So I'm going to say next to that. And I don't want it in my JHipster project. That is another course I am working on. Go to courses, reactive Spring, and I got a directory all set up for it. We will stay there. Just double checking things. Everything looks good, so I am going to go ahead and create that project. And IntelliJ is actually interacting with the Spring website, start.spring.io, which is Josh Long's favorite website. And everything I did here, if you are using a different IDE, you could go through these exact same steps by going to start.spring.io. selecting the exact same options. And what the website is going to do is provide you a zip file with everything pre-configured. So let's take a quick look at the Maven POM here so you can see that the website start.spring.io gave me this Maven POM. You can see that we have the Spring Boot M5 version, Spring Boot Starter for WebFlux, Project Lombok, and then we also have these two dependencies for Spring Boot Starter Test and Reactor Test. So this is exactly what we want. That's everything that we're going to need for setting up this project, which is going to be a quote service. And coming up in the course, we are going to go through this step by step and build up the quote service and just show you the stubs here in case you have not seen it. We do get a stub of Spring Boot web application, an empty application.properties file, and then a stub of a test. And let's just go ahead and run this. And really, this is kind of an important test if you don't have any tests out there. What this test is going to do is actually start up the Spring context and make sure that you don't have any errors. It's a dumb, simple test, but I'll tell you, sometimes you accidentally introduce something and you don't realize that you've messed up the Spring context. So kind of a simple test, but also an important test because it will catch errors. So this is the project that has been created. Pretty simple project structure. Main thing here is the Maven POM. And again, we are on the Spring Boot M.5. As new releases come out, I will update their source code. I'm not going to go back and update every video for the milestone releases of Spring, but we will clean up the POM and get the dependencies working right as new milestone releases are released. And once we get on to actual true releases that are released into the wild, we will not need these repositories anymore. But these are important. This is where we get the snapshot and the milestone releases, both for the dependencies of Spring and then these plugin repositories. That gives us the capability to run the milestone releases of the Spring Boot Maven plugin. All right, in this video, we are going to take a look at setting up our quote object. So pretty simple object. It's got just a few properties there, a ticker symbol, a big decimal for the price, and then the instance of that point in time of when the quote was made. So that's the concept behind it. Clean this up a little bit. Now, if you follow my courses, you know that I am a fan of Project Lombok. I'm not going to go into Project Lombok too much in depth here. In my Spring 5 course, I do have a whole section on Project Lombok. So what I'm going to do here is annotate this class with data. And just as a quick recap for Project Lombok, what's going to happen here is the data source, download sources here. Data is going to add in the Project Lombok annotations for getter, setter, required args, toString, and equals and hash code. So it's a pretty nice annotation for us. And in a nutshell, if you're not familiar with Project Lombok, it is an annotation processor. So at compile time, this annotation is going to put a hook into the Java compiler and generate these properties and methods for us. So we don't have to write out all the getters and setters. So it's real nice project. I'm a big fan of it. Now, we do get, double check, we do get a no args constructor. And let's add in a couple more constructors. And we want ticker and price. And I'm going by the example that I'm working from. And they also do a double here. And I think that's a convenience method. And what this is doing, doubles can be a little bit funny, but so you have a lot of, can have a number of decimals there and basically passing in the math context, we're setting the precision to 2 decimals. So that that allows us to pass in a double or a big decimal when we're constructing it just by constructor or just by ticker and price. And as a recap, Project Lombok is going to give us a required args constructor, so nothing's required. I'm going to add in a no args constructor as well. And that is another Project Lombok annotation. Now let's take a quick peek here. I am going to go out to the Spring project or to Maven lifecycle. I'm going to say compile. While that's happening, one tip here is when you're working with Project Lombok, come into your IntelliJ or your IDE settings and go over to build, compiler, annotation processors. And you want to make sure that you have that enabled for annotation processing. So that'll allow IntelliJ to automatically pick up the Project Lombok stuff. That is an important step. So our build is complete. So what I want to do is take a quick look at our classes. So let me close this out. So this is the generated code. So you can see that IntelliJ has gone and decompiled it for us so we can see what Project Lombok did with our quote class. And it's enhanced the class quite a bit for us. So here's our constructors for it, all the getters and setters. It implements a nice equals method, as well as a hash code method, toString. You can see here that we do get a nice toString method. And then down here, not readily apparent, we did add in that no args constructor. So there's our no args constructor. So nice implementation of the class. So if you're not comfortable with Project Lombok or not familiar with Project Lombok, it's a huge, huge time saver. And I want to make sure that you understood. So this is what we wrote here for our quote Mojo. And this is what actually got generated. So Project Lombok does a real nice job for us. Now in this video, what we want to do is set up a quote generator service. And you can see I've defined an interface there, and it's a pretty simple interface. Actually, I don't need public there. Get rid of that. And what it does is it's going to return back a flux of our quote objects. And we're going to put a period in there, a duration, and that duration is going to be how often or how frequently we emit the quote value. And just as a reminder, what this is going to be doing is Flux is going to be like an infinite stream of quotes. Once it starts, it's going to go on forever until we ask for it to stop. So that's kind of how the streaming is going to work. So let's go ahead and take a look at the implementation of it. And here's the implementation of it. And I'm not doing any logging here, so I can get rid of the Lombok annotation. And I've annotated it as a service, and it implements our quote service interface. And what I've done here is it sets up in the constructor, it just adds in a list of tech quotes of tech stocks. So we got Apple, Microsoft, Google, Oracle, IBM, Intel, Red Hat, and VMware. And the quote prices are roughly accurate as of today, October 18th, 2017. So they are definitely going to be changing in the future. But for our purposes here, what we want to be doing is taking these and adjusting them randomly. And down here on line 40 is where the interesting stuff really starts to happen. And this is where we're going to generate a flux. Now on 45 to 48, we are passing in a function that's going to take in a synchronous sync. And this is a way for us to synchronize the code across calls. So it's going to pass in an initial index of 0. And until this returns back true there on line 48, it's going to repeat. And as it repeats, it's going to update our quotes. And you can see here, we're changing some things inside a function. Technically wrong, but good enough for our purposes here because we want to be emitting a stream of value. So this is just for demonstration purposes here. We are going to be taking the quotes and then updating the values on the quotes. So technically we are mutating data there from within a function, but forgive us, this is just for this. We're going to be playing with this quite a bit. What we want is a stream of unique quotes that are going to have their values and times changing. Now, there's a lot that we can do with the flux generator. So this first step of generate, that's going to get us an updated set of quotes. Now, next up on line 52, we are going to zip with a flux interval. So this is a flux that is going to emit at a specific rate. And that rate is off the period, and that is the period that we pass in to the method. So we're going to say X period. So that gives us control. So we can say emit a quote every second, every 5 seconds, every tenth of a second. So it gives us a lot of control over how this behaves, and we'll be seeing that. Now, next we are doing a map. And what happens is that we do a zip. And actually, I'm going to split this out so it's a little bit clearer and how it's working. So we're doing a zip. So this merges the two. Let's see here if it. So you can see that this actually creates a a tuple of quote and the long from that. And what we want to do now in the next step is we want to drop off that tuple and just get back to our quote value. So all this is doing is setting up a flux that's going to send a value every X period. So important to understand what it's doing there. It's actually kind of cool how this is all working for generating a stream. And I'm not going to lie, I stole this shamelessly from the Spring guys. It's pretty clever what they're doing here. Now, what we want to do here, you can see there on line 56, we're going to set the instance. So we'll get a bunch of prices set up here, but we want to set the instance to now for the quote. And here we are going to provide a log function, and you'll see that coming up. Now, line 63, that is a method that is going to go in and update the price of the quote. So we're just going to do a random adjustment on that price. And that is called actually up in line 46. So that's what's going there on there. Now, I did write a test for this, and I got something interesting in the test implementation to show you. Now, here I am. I'm going to get a flux of quotes. I'm going to say take 10. I'm just going to do a system out. And now let's go ahead and run this. I got something interesting to show you on this. And we see that nothing happened. Now, if I change this to 22,000 or something like that, so a really big number, so we're going to take a whole bunch of them. And what's happening is this is running so quick. I'm not sure if I can even get it down to 1 here. So it runs so quick. I'll try 1 millisecond, see if we can get any output from this. It's literally running so quick, and it's falling through. It gets to the end of the test. Trying an experiment here. It's just a little experiment. I want to see if I can get any output from it at all. So no, we're not. Basically, it's going through it so quick, it's not being able to get to where it's running before the test terminates. So the test is running, and there's no reason for it to wait. So if I come in and do a thread sleep, and I'm going to copy that a couple times. The flux is running quickly, so now we can see that it's actually getting some output there. And it was running the output as long as it could, so it never got through the 22,000. The test is terminating before the flux completes. And doing a thread sleep is not a very elegant way of handling this. So I got another way to show you, and it's actually a pretty nice way. So let's go in and do this. So now I've got a little bit more control over it. So I want to see more what's going on there. So I'm creating a subscriber lambda, and you saw this previously in the course. So I did copy over some of this. Now we have an error handler, and this time I'm creating a countdown latch. So this is a way that we can ask for the program to pause and wait. So I'm creating a new countdown latch of 1. So I'm expecting it to get hit once. And now I have a runnable called all done. We're going to tap into that stream. And this countdown latch, we're going to say count down. So it's going to take it down to 0. And here on line 54, what happens is it says await, and it's going to wait for the all done lambda to get called. So let's go ahead and run this guy, and we'll see that it runs a lot better, or a lot nicer if we actually get the output that we're expecting. So now you can see that we are getting our quote output here. We're actually getting the on next, so that's a log function from the service. So if I show you the service implementation, that output is from the log that we are specifying. And then here, that is the toString of the quote price. So we can see that the instants are changing as it rolls through there, and we are getting different stock prices. So if I come over here, I can actually change this to, let's change that to 30. And this is a much more elegant way of handling it than using thread sleeps, because now we're putting a programmatic hook in there. If you are trying to do with thread sleeps, that is something that's going to be quite variable. I've seen people try to do that, and it runs fine on their laptop. Then they go and deploy it to a CI server that's got a load on it, and all of a sudden all their tests are breaking because they're not sleeping long enough. So utilizing the countdown latch is a much more elegant way. Using thread sleep is something that's not going to be producing repeatable results. So just to reiterate, we are getting a stream of quotes here. this fetch test stream here, he is going to fail to produce any output because the test terminates before we can get anything out of the flux. Here we are using a countdown latch to tell the test to wait for the output. And these are just pseudo tests. I'm using these tests as demonstration purposes. If I was really writing a unit test over this, I'd put in something a little more elaborate, and we are going to do that coming up in the course. But here, I just want to demonstrate how we are generating this, our quote generator service. Okay, the service we're going to set up with a new functional configuration that we have in Spring Framework 5. And what we want to do is set up a handler. So this is going to be a class that's going to handle web requests coming in. So there's actually two components to it. One is a handler, one is a router. And we're going to create the handler in this video. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to create a new package. I'll call that web. Or I could call that reactive web if I want to be really cool. And let's create a new Java class. I'm going to call him quote handler. Of course, add that to Git. And this is going to be a Spring component. And we want an implementation of that quote generator service. And technically, I could just do that as a class, but here I'm emulating a Spring managed component so that we can see how that works. And again, if you're a little bit new to Spring, by setting it up this way, because it is a Spring managed component and I have a single constructor here, Spring is going to automatically inject that for us. So before, I think of Spring Framework 4.3, I'd have to put the auto-wired annotation on that. But in Spring 5 and 4.3 and later, you do not need to do that. Now there's two methods that I want to implement. We're going to handle two things in our little service. One is just to emit a batch of quotes. So here what we want to do is a public mono, and here we're going to do a server response. And the way the new functional stuff inside of Spring Framework 5 is going to work inside of WebFlux, we need to implement a method that's going to take in a server request and then return back the server response. And here I'm working with the request object, and I want to see if it's got a query parameter size, and we'll implement this later. And if it does, we'll take it. So if we don't specify size, we'll just return back 10 elements. And we're going to return back application.json. So let's make this a little bit cleaner. And I had one small mistake there. I had brought in the wrong import, static import. So if I get rid of that, show you what happened here. Import static method. I accidentally grabbed the response entity okay, and I wanted the server response okay. So two different things that we're working with. So here we want the server response. So that's kind of an important step. And effectively what I'm doing is that I'm coming here, and in a real application, I probably want to externalize that somehow as far as the frequency. So I'm going to get a stream every 100 milliseconds from our quote generator service. And then we're going to specify a take, and the size is going to be the size parameter coming in off the request, or 10 if it's not set. And we're going to return back a stream of the quote classes from, it'll be a flux in there. So what's happening is we are returning back a mono. So if you're a little green to the Flux stuff or the WebFlux stuff, that is in fact a mono because that is a server response, but inside that server response will be a flux of our quote stream. So easily confused there, a lot going on here, but to keep in mind what this is going to be doing is it's a handler that's going to handle the server request, and we're going to do the functional configuration coming up in the next video. But here, this is going to handle server requests coming in, It's going to go out to our service, get the flux stream, append that to the server response, which will be in a mono type, and it will get that returned back to the handler for us. Now in this video, we want to configure the functional endpoint. So we're going to use the functional syntax for configuring Spring WebFlux. So we created the handler in the last video. Now what we want to do is come in and set up the set up the router. So I'm going to come in, create a new Java class. I'm going to call this quote router. Now in this case, this actually becomes a configuration class inside Spring. Just configuration. Now we're going to return back a router function. Going to return back a server request. And we annotate this with a bean as well, because this does become a Spring bean inside the configuration. And because we're setting this up, and I spelled route right, because we are setting this up, we are going to get a quote handler injected from the Spring context. So that's how the two are related within the Spring context. We're going to get a bean, but we define that quote handler, just to recap that, this is defined as a Spring managed component. So when we get to the quote router, which is a Spring configuration class, that is going to get wired up by the Spring context. Now what we can do here is return router functions. Now we're going to need a static import here. So you can see here I'm setting up the route of quotes, application JSON, and let's see here. I got one little mistake here. It should be server response. That's why it was not happy. So now you can see that this is setting up our route here to return things back. So just as a quick recap, this is a configuration. It's a bean. It's defining a router function. It's going to take in our quote handler, sets up a route. So whenever we go to the URL of quotes and with a media type of application JSON, we are going to invoke this handler of fetch quotes. So if we come over here and click on our handler, we have this fetch quotes option here. And it's going to look at the server request to take in a size of 10, sets up our generator service with a duration of 100 milliseconds, and takes the size, which is going to be 10 or whatever is passed, and it's going to return back a flux of quotes to our server response, which is also a mono, which is another publisher. All right, in this video, we want to take a look at testing our little stock quote service. And in this, we are going to run an integration test. So you can see on line 17 here, I've annotated the class with run with the Spring Runner class. And I'm saying that it's a Spring Boot test, and I'm specifying the web environment to bring up a random port. So this will run on a random port that's available. So if we have something running our system, we won't get a conflict, considering that only one process at a time can bind to a network port. So that will prevent any problem. So we'll generate a random port there so that our test is portable to things like CI build servers. Now, the next thing that we are doing that's interesting here is on line 22, we're telling the Spring context to wire in a web test client. So this is going to be pre-configured by the Spring framework. It's going to fire in our application information into it. So we'll have a ready to go web test client that we can use for our test. Now, on line 25 is where I'm running a test against the fetch quotes. Remember, we have two operations that we do in our example here. One is fetch quotes and stream quotes. The fetch quotes isn't too bad. I'm specifying a size of 20 there. And remember, for that to work, we're going to do a get against the /quotes. with a media type of application underscore JSON. Now we do the exchange, and then we can go into some assertions. This is very similar to mock MVC where we have the expects here, but it's different from mock MVC. So we can say we're expecting a status of OK. We're expecting a content type of application JSON, and then we can expect a body come back, a list of quotes. We're saying that we has a size of 20. And then on line 35, I'm doing a consume with, and this is going to iterate over all the quotes. And we're going to do some assertions on that. So we're just doing some simple things here. We're asserting that the stock price is positive and that we have a list size of 20. And also want to point out on line 22 there, got a little squiggly. This is the IntelliJ IDE thinking that I don't have an instance, but I actually do have an instance of web test client. So that's probably something that's going to be resolved, or possibly something off in my configuration. But I think it's just a feature that in JetBrains is not implemented yet. So let's go ahead and run this. We can see that he's going to run, and this is going to behave a lot different than from the stream, because here we are saying, hey, give me a set of 20 records, and then it's done. So there's nothing that happens after that. Now, this is in contrast with the stream here. And actually, I'm going to collapse this test so we can see it a little bit better. Now, this basically opens up a stream forever, effectively. And I am limiting there, so this is a little bit different. So we're going to get a flux back, and the flux is kind of never ending because we're asking for a stream. So if you remember, we generated our generator is just going to sit there and keep emitting stocks until the consumer goes away. On line 55, I'm saying take 10. Now we run into the same problem here if we don't have the countdown latch. It just blows through here. So let me run this normally first. And here I'm just doing assert stock price is positive. And you can see that I'm getting chatter in here, the logs. And I am in fact getting the log output as expected. Now, if I come in here and comment this out, it should just drop right through. And we actually did get one quote through before it stopped, but you can see it stopped pretty quick. We got right to the test complete, so that's why we use the test countdown latch. Even though I'm saying take 10, the subscriber is going to get there, but what's happening is that this is running and we fall right through, so there's no way to stop our processing of the test. The test is going to exit before it completes. So now if I re-enable the countdown latch, I get all the stock tickers. If you count it, that will actually add up to 10 of them, so that does in fact work properly. And it's important that these do match. You probably could get some random results where you could run different mixes here, but countdown latch, you start at 10, you take 10, and each time it comes through a subscriber, you do a countdown, and then you wait for it to complete. And when the await gets to 0, the counter gets to 0, that's when this guy effectively releases and you fall to test complete. So a couple of nuances there. And then also just as a reminder, we are doing a get against quotes. You can see configure get quotes. And then I'm specifying the application stream JSON, which is going to cause us to basically create an endless stream as long as it is running. Now, if I was running inside of a program that stayed alive, I wouldn't need the countdown latch. If I had some type of processing where I was sending this to another consumer. So that this is really a feature that we have to implement because we are in test environment, because this JVM process is going to end. That's why we're using the countdown latch here. All right, this concludes the part of the course on creating our WebFlux stock quote service. So this is going to be an important little service. We're going to be using this service to emit events to other services that we're going to play with streaming events. So I hope you had fun in this part of the course, because I had fun developing it. It's fun to have this little process. You're just going to sit up there and run and run and run. Coming up in the course, I'm working on the next module already. Coming up in this course, you'll see this service running, and we'll set up consumer and start consuming from it. So that's going to be a fun part to do, and we'll do several different consumers coming up in the course, but this is going to be a cornerstone. So that's why I'm going to take this source code and move it down to the master branch, and we'll be working from that. You'll be able to check out this branch at any time. We'll probably be making some changes in that coming up to accommodate other things and evolve it a little bit. But I will keep this up to date, and because we will be utilizing this coming up in future modules of the course. This is an important thing. I hope you had fun seeing how we can leverage all the new stuff inside of Spring Framework 5, not only the reactive types, but the new functional programming paradigm of doing this functional composition for declaring the Spring Framework configuration. So definitely a paradigm shift, and it's like a whole new world here. So I hope you're having fun at this part of the course. Coming up, we are going to consume these events into MongoDB. So, and we'll do this all reactively. So we'll get everything coming into MongoDB in a reactive fashion. So that's going to be a fun part of the course to work on. I'm looking forward to showing you guys that stuff.